Bitcoin is on everyone's radar right now, and there's a reason why. In this market update, we dive deep into the latest analysis from none other than Stephan Livera. He's breaking down exactly what's happening with Bitcoin at this very moment. Stephan, one of the sharpest minds in the crypto space, is known for calling out key market trends before anyone else. Today, he's shedding light on the forces shaping Bitcoin's future, whether it's skyrocketing prices, surprising market moves, or a potential shakeup no one saw coming. If you're holding Bitcoin, thinking of investing, or just curious about what's next, you can't afford to miss this. Let's jump in and hear Stephan Livera's powerful insights on Bitcoin and what's happening right now.
Kind of like, I'm shouting from the rooftops, anyone please listen to me. Like, there's a problem in our fiat currency system and you need to learn about Bitcoin because that's the answer. And look, we might believe that, and I believe it's true, but not everybody's ready to hear that message, right? It's like, there's a saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right? So there's a lot of people who are simply not ready to hear the message. They don't want to be saved, and you can't save them. I think my approach is a little different now. Of course, I talk about Bitcoin, I put out podcasts, and I write articles, and I put things out there. I have my view is that it's just going to be slower than what many of us were hoping for. We have to be patient. That's probably the lesson that I've learned in my time.
Do you play the market at all? Because we know that there's going to be a peak, there's going to be a bottom. Do you have a portion of your portfolio that you use strategically to sell and buy, or you just buy and hold?
I think most people who try it will lose, right? But you know what? It's hard for me to sit here in 2024 and say, it's not tempting. You know what I mean? Because now, I've just been like a hodl and accumulate guy, right? Like I haven't been a trade the cycles kind of guy, right? And because I think most people who try it will lose. But it is kind of uncanny right now as we speak, right? Think about all the bull years, 2013, 2017, 2021, 2025. And then what were the bear years? Okay, 2014, 2018, 2022, 2026? Can it be that simple? I don't know. And so I think the thing is, I think this is another thing, and I'm sure you might have seen online, there's various discussion, different models. I think power law is actually something interesting to me now. And it's sort of interesting to me that, we're seeing this diminishing returns, diminishing volatility over time, but we still see this cycle dynamic. So I think halvings in a sense, they don't matter as much as they used to from the pure supply perspective. Maybe it's a psychological thing. Maybe it's like, we would wish that it was an orderly transition to the lifeboats of Bitcoin, but in practice, it's not like that, right? In practice, what's the normal way people act? It's like a herd mentality. They sort of rush in and rush out. And so could I see a similar, herd rushing in and rushing out cycle, right? Because like, if you're here by now, at least you and I, we probably believe long-term, yeah, absolutely. Bitcoin is going to be the money of the world. Someday the way people who have one whole coin will be seen like the way we think of a deca millionaire, a deca fiat millionaire today. Like, I think, in 20 years time, something like that, yeah, Bitcoin will be similar to that. So I think there will be these cycles. I'll say it this way. I think most people do not have the emotional and psychological, let's say, fortitude to kind of play the cycle. But is it possible? Yeah, I believe it probably is possible. But you also have to think about taxes, fees, some of these other aspects. Obviously, you and I here, we're in Dubai, but so there's not personal income tax, therefore no capital gains tax on the coins that you've earned while you're here. But I mean, for people around the world, depending where you are, it could matter, right? So the short answer is, for me, I've not done it. I have just tried to accumulate steadily. That said, I'm not opposed to, right? My view of Bitcoin is it's savings technology, right? So if you have a big life event and you need to crack some coins open to spend a bit, I mean, hey, we don't live forever, right? Because there's this caricature online of like, you got to be a hodler who lives under the bridge, and you've memorized your 12-word seed because you don't want to buy a hardware wallet, and you scrounge for food. Like, that's like the meme, right? But in practice, when you really talk to real Bitcoiners, you go to the conferences or you talk at the events, these are normal guys and girls, men and women with families, right? Like it's not that stereotype, right? So yes, that stereotype is kind of, there's a little bit of that, but in practice, if you need to, if you're getting married or you're having a child or you need to spend some coin for this, that, and the other, it's your life. The main caveat I would say is be very judicious about when you spend, because when you go to spend, it's very unlikely that you're going to end up with more coins in the future, right? It's very unlikely. So you need to be very careful and say, look, I'm spending these coins because maybe I want to buy this house, or I want to buy this car or whatever, and I'm going to be comfortable with that, right? Because a lot of people are going to really have a lot of regret, right? So as an example, if people go and spend, I don't know, whatever, 10 Bitcoin, 10,000 Bitcoins on 2 pizzas, or even today, right? Whatever Bitcoin is at now, whatever, 95,000 or whatever it is today. If people spend, 10 Bitcoin or 20 Bitcoin on a property, imagine in 20 years time, when 1 Bitcoin is, probably over 10 million per coin, people are going to be like, yeah, I paid 20 Bitcoin for this house. You gotta make sure that it's a small enough fraction of your stack that you're comfortable with that choice. And you're gonna be, you're okay with that. Because a lot of people won't be okay with that, right? If you sort of woke up 20 years down the line and you're like, oh man, I spent 20 Bitcoin on that property, I could have just hodled, I could have just kept on renting. I mean, these are the questions that every hodler, this is the hodler's dilemma, right? Because, we don't live forever. We still need to eat and feed ourselves and clothe ourselves, and maybe we have family and children to feed as well. But, you have to find the right balance.
I've gone back and forth within my head as well, think about, okay, how do I manage my finances? Because like you said, there is nothing that over time is going to beat Bitcoin. So the big question I have is like, it's not even about selling Bitcoin, it's like, what am I buying?
Right.
So it opens up a Pandora box of options, and that's why I like to bounce off people like yourself, because we share a lot of stuff in common. And some of the guests I have, they just trade the market, which is extremely risky, because as far as I know, tomorrow Saudi buys a bunch of billions and this thing goes to 200,000, who knows? And they're left like the skeleton meme, right, waiting for the dip, right?
Yeah.
It's difficult. Also, like you said so well, I think cycles are dictated not just by Bitcoin itself anymore, but by money in general. Like there is the election cycle in the US, if you zoom out, there is a lot happening in the world. So, and like you said super well as well, I think now we're at the point where the coin that been mined daily, weekly, monthly, yearly are not going to impact.
Right. A small fraction, right? And that's one of my bugbears, is people kind of just comparing, oh look, see, if the miners, whatever, because they're assuming only the miners are the natural sellers, but that's not actually correct, right? Because now you've got all these OG hodlers, many of them are selling, and here's the thing, people on social media might want to talk it up about how I'm a hardcore hodler and I never sell your Bitcoin, Objectively, statistically, every cycle has been broken by a lot of OGs selling coins. Like, that is a historical fact, right? Whether it's 2017, 2013, 2017, 2021, like, if you look on-chain, and obviously there's on-chain analytics and people who talk about these things and who can speak about that in better detail than I can, but every one of those cycles was, broken off by enough coins re-entering the supply, right? So people talk about the stuff like, oh, the coins on exchanges are going down or whatever. It's like, mate, people can have their coins in their hardware wallet or their multi-sig, and in like 10 minutes, the coins are on the exchange and can be sold or on an OTC or whatever, right? So we need better analysis, right? To kind of really think about who are the actual natural sellers over, on an ongoing basis.
Who do you think is buying ETFs? Because I've spoken to Matt Hogan, and it was a while back, he's actually coming back on the podcast in January, and he was saying that most of the ETF buys were retail, which I thought it was interesting.
So yeah, from what I've heard, now he would know better than me, right? Because these guys are actually working inside the ETFs. But from what I've heard, it's that some of the larger institutional players, they need kind of approvals, and maybe, look, like it or not, we live in this world where everyone's kind of looking at the high status people and being like, do I have their approval? Is it okay for me to hold this opinion?
What they have the
right? It's kind of, and that's, in a sense, like it or not, that's also why a lot of people do this kind of influencer marketing and things like this, because whether we like it or not, people look at what they're saying, right? And so now the good news is the financial influencers, the Ray Dalios of the world, are now coming out and saying, hey, it's okay for you to have Bitcoin now. It's okay for you to have this view, right? So Ray Dalio, I think just 2 weeks ago in Abu Dhabi Finance Week, just an hour down the road, was talking there saying, he was saying, I can't remember the exact comment, but it was something like, I would rather hold Bitcoin or gold than, debt instruments. That's a very powerful statement, right? Or BlackRock, literally one of the biggest in the world, is saying, yeah, it's okay for you to hold 2% Bitcoin, right? And then now, think about all those financial advisors out there in normie fiat world who have their little permission slip from their sort of overlords. Yes, see, it's okay. I won't get fired now if I recommend, you, let's say the normie, it's okay for you to hold 2% Bitcoin because I've got my little, BlackRock said, so I won't get fired for it now. There's this kind of career risk that's gone. So I think there's a bit of that. Of course, by now, people have heard about Bitcoin, but here's the real challenge. How many of them would be buying the dip? How many of them would go through, see Bitcoin take a drop and still be excited to buy more? That's, I think, the real test, right? Because it's easy to kind of, human psychology and the mentality, the momentum, it's easy to buy things when they're going up, right? But when it's kind of on the down, how many people are rushing in to buy more, right? And yes, we're seeing some of that. There's all the hype, right? The strategic reserve, the ETFs, Michael Saylor and the MicroStrategy and MetaPlanet and Semler Scientific and whoever else, other people copying that strategy. So there's things, certainly, there's a lot of people accumulating. To answer your question, though, I think there are pension funds buying, and that some of that's public, right? Like in the US, some of these pension, state pension entities are purchasing Bitcoin, high net worth family offices and things like this. So I think it's just really a mix of those things, but it's just that not a lot of people have a high percent of their net worth in Bitcoin. Now, of course, you and I and maybe a lot of listeners, we probably have a decent portion of our net worth in Bitcoin because we believe in this thing. But there's a lot of people who are, one or two layers out on that onion, let's say, who are not as, either financially invested or mentally and psychologically invested in the concept of Bitcoin, this money outside the state.
Bitcoin is constantly changing, and as we've seen today, there's no shortage of action in the market. Whether it's sharp rebounds, market predictions, or those big moves everyone is watching for, one thing is clear: this is a journey worth keeping an eye on. If you found this breakdown of what's happening to Bitcoin right now helpful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. My goal is to keep you informed with clear updates, expert insights, and everything you need to know about the crypto world.